This is Michael Popok, Dark Glasses, Dark Sky. It must be time for Legal AF After Dark. Kamala Harris, is she best positioned as a former prosecutor to go after Donald Trump? And what about all the lawsuits that MAGA are already planning to file against her to try to delegitimize, destabilize, and eventual presidency of President Kamala Harris? They're doing it now. They're not waiting. They're going to, when she gets elected, not if. What are they going to say? She's illegitimate. She's a fraud. She wasn't properly on the ballot in 50 states. Joe Biden needed to be on the ballot in 50 states. They want to be able on the Republican side to pick who our nominee's going to be. And they're going to try to file lawsuits following the blueprint of the Heritage Foundation, an organization I had only heard about recently, and now I can't stop talking about. We cover it all on Legal AF, the podcast. Take a listen. Let's pick it up with the lawsuits, personal ad hominem attacks. We know it's a party that attacked itself. We're not surprised by any of that. Barack Obama was a secret Muslim who went to school in a madrasa. John McCain had a black illegitimate child. So why does any of this surprise us? Now let's talk about the lawsuits that are inevitable. The Heritage Foundation, it's been reported, issued an emergency memo for an organization we never heard of a month or two ago. We certainly can't stop talking about them and their role, whether they're having created the Project 2025 first 180 days, God forbid, of a new Trump administration and what he would do, to issuing these kind of alerts and trying to argue that Joe Biden has to stay on the ballot, or no Democrat should be listed on the ballot, to try to make this some sort of 50 state ballot for Trump, but 45 state ballot for the Democrats. And they're going to file lawsuits, especially in Wisconsin and Nevada and some other places, to try to keep Kamala off the ballot, despite the fact that the delegates haven't even voted yet for their nominee. And there's no way in hell any of this will work. But it never stopped MAGA before. They filed 70 lawsuits to try to cling to power in 2021, and none of them worked. And yet they did it anyway. And then they've got this attack on the Federal Election Commission with a filing and a complaint. I'll take that one, and then I'll turn the lawsuits one over to you, Karen. Does that make sense?
Whatever you want to do.
All right, let's do Federal Election Commission. $91.5 million was in the war chest that was made out by people who donated to the Biden-Harris campaign. See, Harris's name was always on those accounts, was always part of it. And so she has a right, and it is appropriate under election law for her to have received the transfer, if you will, of the funds that were in the account for her administration and her campaign, the Biden-Harris campaign, now being the Harris for President campaign. And that's really it. But after Joe Biden filed the papers with the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, which, just between all of us on this podcast, and no pun intended, is pretty feckless. They don't have a lot of power. They don't have a lot of teeth. There's not much they can do. Their fines are very low. They don't go to court and stop things. But, this is who we have in charge of our elections. And so he filed the paperwork in order to move the money over. And they immediately, the Trump people, the MAGA people, immediately filed an objection and an administrative lawsuit within the FEC to have them reject the transfer of the $90.5 million over to the Harris campaign. First of all, they have to exhaust administrative remedies, meaning the FEC has 120 days. We can all do the math on our fingers of where that time's out to make a ruling based on that complaint before you can run to a federal court and ask them to expedite it or to make that ruling. We're already, let's say, August 1. That's 4 months, 120 days. And so August, September, October, November, December, that's after the election. So the chances of, first, they're wrong on the election law, the Trump side. And so the transfer is appropriate. But the FEC, which is sort of bipartisan but is democratically controlled, is not going to be making a ruling before the 120 days is up. They're not going to put themselves in the middle of this, and the money has already been moved over appropriately to the other candidate on the ticket, who's now moved into the lead driver's seat in Kamala Harris. So, but that's one way. And then, of course, they can run around at rallies and talk about how they got $90 million and it's a fraud and it's false and all of that. Trump's already telling his supporters that they should be reimbursed for all of the money that they paid to do ad campaign against Joe Biden, because there was never an intention to have Joe Biden be the candidate. And now Donald Trump wants to be reimbursed. It's these ridiculous arguments that just, again, try to undermine the validity and the credibility and the integrity of the other side and make them subhuman, in this case for Kamala Harris. And then there's all the, the emergency memo by the Heritage Foundation talks about going after battleground states and trying to keep Joe Biden on the ballot and or Kamala Harris off. Kara, what can you tell us about those?
It's just crazy what they're trying to do. And it takes some time to try to wrap your head around it, because when you think about it, the Democratic convention hasn't even happened yet. So they haven't nominated a person yet to be the candidate. So when they first started making this claim, again, like I said, it's not very, at least to me, I don't always understand what MAGA is talking about, because it's based on false premises. And so this is one of those times that it's based on false premises, in my opinion. But it started with, I think, Speaker Mike Johnson actually on Sunday said that Democrats could, quote, run into some legal impediments. And he thought it would be, quote, unlawful for someone other than Joe Biden to be the Democratic nominee. And again, how's that possible? They haven't even had a convention, like there hasn't been a nomination yet. So I don't get that. That the convention that has happened is the Republican convention, not the Democratic one. But anyway, the other thing is no ballot access deadlines have passed yet. And so it also makes no sense what they're talking about. But again, there's this issue about one state, it's Ohio, and Ohio had a deadline that originally was prior to the Democratic National Committee's convention. And what they decided to do, and this was before Kamala was put forth and Joe Biden stepped down. At the time, they were worried that Biden wasn't going to meet the Ohio deadline in time because of this deadline that they had. And so what they did was, Ohio had a ballot access deadline of August 7th, and the DNC announced that they would have a virtual roll call beforehand to ensure that the Democratic nominee at that time was supposed to be Joe Biden would appear on the Ohio ballot. But then Ohio passed a law that temporarily extended this deadline to September 1st. So either way, they were either going to hold an early roll call to put Biden on. Now they extended it to September 1st. Either way, it would have applied to Biden or Harris. So, I mean, yeah, so this is not a Kamala Harris issue. This is the date of the Democratic convention. So, but they're using this, even though they passed a law, to say, oh, well, that can't possibly be the case. But it's totally moot. It's totally moot because Harris is going to be in the same position that Biden was in, and she will be nominated at the convention. And so I don't think it's going to work. But other than Ohio, I think that's really the only one that they're sort of talking about. But again, like you said, they're going to fight it. They're going to go and they're going to fight it, and they're going to bring lawsuits. And what's really weird to me is that you can bring frivolous lawsuits. I mean, again, as a practicing lawyer, and I am one now in private practice, you are so careful. Every little thing you do is so careful. You don't, like, there was something I wanted to do recently in a filing because I thought it would be more effective to put certain things in a filing now. And I learned you can't do that. You just can't do that. It's not appropriate at this time. You can do it later on in the case, but you can't do it at this early stage. And so we don't do it, right? Like, lawyers are very careful. They don't bring frivolous motions. You don't do things when you're not supposed to. You don't say that the law says something when it says something totally different. Someone like me would be sanctioned and probably disbarred. But somehow the MAGA people, they get away with it. They do it over and over again. They handpick their judges and they get them to do crazy things like Eileen Cannon has done in Mar-a-Lago. And they get them to do things that have nothing to do with the practice of law as we know it. But that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to somehow contort arguments to make it so that in the swing states and the battleground states that argue that Kamala Harris shouldn't be on the ballot, even though nobody had been nominated yet as the Democratic nominee. So that's as much as I can understand this new MAGA thing as possible. So because I barely can understand them half the time. Their arguments are so frivolous and ridiculous.
And I don't want to give them more credibility by talking about them as if they're legitimate arguments. What they'll do is they'll lose. They won't get a federal judge to bite at this at all. Even the Supreme Court, which likes to stay out of quote unquote politics, except when they want to stick their big fat noses in it or put their big fat thumbs on the scale in favor of a candidate that they enjoy, like Donald Trump, they'll say, oh, it's a political question. It has to do with the electorate. We're not going to get involved. They are not going to even get involved with this, I would predict. There's nothing to get involved with. The party has the right to choose who is going to be their candidate, and nobody on the other side can't tell us who needs to be our candidate or to force Joe Biden to stay on the ballot or to argue that there's a blank. And I think if that happens, we'll just have, X millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Democrats, independents, and other thinking people just write in the name Kamala Harris, or as people are now writing in our chat, yes, we come, or CAM, play on Yes We Can by Joe Biden. So I have zero, and that's pretty fair bet. I have zero worry that any of them. But what will happen is they make this noise now. Then they have the excuse when she wins, and then they file the lawsuits on the other end, arguing stolen election, fraudulent election. I mean, I got people around me that are like MAGA who said to me, like I said to somebody recently, you thought before Biden stepped down, you think Trump's going to beat Biden. What did you think? And just tell me, I just want to know, what did you think in 2020? He said, I thought Trump was going to beat Biden. I said, right. Now that didn't happen. Now, why do you think that didn't happen? And he said, come on, And then he started me down this rabbit hole of fraud in the election. And I was like, stop. The Republican head of cybersecurity and infrastructure for the election, who was picked by Trump, said it was the safest and most secure election of all time. And while there may have been fraud, there's always some bit of fraud, 0.001%. It's not outcome determinative. But they're going to start that now. And so they're going to claim stolen election. We'll have another unfortunate Jan 6 repeat, hopefully this time with a combination of the Secret Service, Metro Police, Capitol Police, and National Guard ready for anything like this again. Because if people think Biden, as gentlemanly, statesman-like as he was, winning the election led to Jan 6th, what do you think is going to happen when Kamala Harris wins the presidency? And here we go. And Trump, of course, is backed into a corner of his own making, because if he's going to attack her as a woman of color, he should look over at his vice president candidate, J.D. Vance, who is married to Usha Vance, who's an Indian American woman who's a person of color, and they practice Hinduism, which I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying it's very hard for him to go after Kamala Harris when his own ticket is diverse. Let's just put it this, at least with a 39-year-old inexperienced fabulist who wrote one book, if you can call that qualified for the office. So let's transition. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, he wrote a book where he made some very strange admissions about a certain relationship with a couch. I was like,
yeah, I didn't read it or watch it. Is it in the movie?
Well, I'm not. It's a little too X-rated for me to be able to say on this channel what J.D. Vance.
Our producer is saying that may or may not be true, so I don't want to continue with it. let's. But he had some. More importantly, he's got some recorded history of saying that Donald Trump is America's Hitler and the needle in the arm of America, a narcotic that's not leading it to a bad place. He's terrible for the white working class. And he's an idiot and shouldn't be elected president. That was in as I said, I think I did it with Ben, when it's easy to tell when JD Vance isn't wearing the beard, he's telling the truth. And when he wears the beard, he's lying. And that's the easiest way when you look at the clips to figure out which JD Vance is which. And that alone, just to show you that, again, not to keep coming back to the differences, but we have to. Joe Biden picks Kamala Harris, qualified to be his number 2 and to step into the role at a moment's notice. Put all the memes aside. I don't care about coconut trees and syntax and something taken out of context. I really don't care about that. I care about the fiber, the moral fiber and character of the person. And she's demonstrated that she deserves the job that she got and earned it. On the other hand, a guy who was in Pennsylvania and almost didn't make it through the campaign chose moments later, a 39-year-old person who's been a part-time senator for 6 months, who's never done a darn thing and admitted that in the foreword of his book, that he hasn't done anything great in his entire life, who just wrote a book. And that's who he thinks should step into the role of president of the United States. If that is one of your first major decisions that you're to be judged on, it's a loser. And he's starting to get, and it's starting to backfire on him because people are waking up to who JD Vance is. Let's, are you
Before you move on, did you see that what Midest Touch uncovered about him? Midest Touch is true. I think it was Ron Filipkowski uncovered a clip of JD Vance talking about how basically criticizing that she's a childless cat lady and saying that because she doesn't have children, she doesn't have an investment in the future, etc. It's just so beyond
about Kamala.
Yes, about Kamala. About Kamala. So
he's a Salty's going to look around for it and see if we can find the clip that you're talking about. It's just
so offensive to say. I mean, I can't even.
What's the praise?
Begin to talk about how offensive it is that the way, because she's a woman, because she doesn't have children, because she has a cat. I mean, I hate to say it, I love the social media. I love the memes that are going around talking about, they basically are like, okay, you want to see a childless cat lady come out, hell hath no fury, and they put up Taylor Swift, because she's but like, it's just crazy. But the fact that they are so anti-women and so offensive to women that I think it's going to bite them, really come back to bite them.
Well, he should read social media when MAGA woke up and realized his wife was brown Indian and they practiced Hinduism. They all went after her. They all said, how is this guy going to be good on immigration? And why are they Hindu names? And Nick Fuentes saying, what happened to good old American names? How is this? And he put up, this is Nick Fuentes, who is alt-right, Proud Boy, but, a supporter of Donald Trump. He put up 2 pictures in his podcast, one of an quote unquote all-American blonde, blue-eyed family, and said, these are the Democrats, and then put up a picture of JD Vance and his loving children and bride.
Salty found the cat video.
All right, I wish we had the cat sponsor today. Maybe we do. Let's roll the video.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Well, I mean, if this they think is going to be the winning strategy to attract women and those that support women over to their party, I think they're in for, well, I think the easy counterpunch for Kamala is going to be that America is not ready to entrust a 39-year-old inexperienced white guy who's flip-flopped about his own head of his party, calling him America's Hitler when he was trying to shill a book or trying to sell a book. And now we're supposed to believe that. And of course, he leaves out that, first of all, Pete Buttigieg has children. He just happens to be gay. He and his husband have a child. Okay, so that's wrong. Kamala is a stepmother a loving stepmother and aunt, has talked about her relationship with her children in her life over and over again. I don't know about the cat part.
They call her Mamala.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the name.
She called herself Mamala and they adopted it. Exactly. Right. So if this is how they're going to position the us against them, they're going to lose by more than 7 million votes.
Right. Like, how can they say she doesn't have children? Anyway, like,
because it's a talking point that goes unchallenged on Fox News.
Even so, who cares? Like, it's okay to not have children. Like, to say that you're somehow less than because
until a month ago, I was childless. Didn't make me less of a defender of democracy.
Exactly. I'm a cat lady and my name is Karen. So I better be careful. I have to be really careful.
You're everybody's favorite, Karen. You're everybody's favorite.
I'm just saying, you know.
Welcome back. We do the show Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time right here on the Midest Touch YouTube channel. And then you can pick us up on all audio podcast platforms. Just plug in Legal AF. We curate the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. We put it all together in a 1 hour long podcast, just like that one. And then I do, and the other contributors of Legal AF do hot takes about every hour right here on the Midest Touch Network about that intersection of law and politics. If you already know about Legal AF and you're part of our audience, we really appreciate you being here. But we're building this thing by word of mouth with your help. Take that clip, send it off to people, and ask them to join our audience. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that was Legal AF. We welcome you to join us on Wednesdays and Saturdays. You can either watch us on YouTube, do the show, and do a live chat with us, or you can pick us up on the audio podcast platforms of your choice. Find out why we named it Legal AF 4 years ago. You'll find out as soon as you join. Until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary. Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.